Now let's turn to the alleged state capture of the Electoral Commission, INEC, suddenly since the 2023 general election in Nigeria. It's a phrase you hear more and more often from many Nigerians. This, of course, a country whose institutions, especially the Electoral Commission, among others, remain hiding in plain sight as part of the empire of the ruling leadership. In other words, an insidious form of systematic political or systemic political corruption that diminishes the democratic character of this country and makes those institutions beholden not to the people but to the interests of the minority ruling class. And unless that custom changes, it will continue to be a threat to democracy and to the people of this country. But how can Nigeria burst out of such harrowing bounds? How can it be freed from its kleptomaniac, kleptocratic politicians who govern chiefly for their private interests at the expense of those they govern, even as discontent continues to stir? Well, according to many, the answer lies in the delivery of a transparently free and fair electoral process. So what are the best options? Well, remember option A4, the open ballot system that delivered the freest and fairest election in Nigeria's history? Well, it's being talked about again, even if just nostalgically. And to tell us more, I'm joined now in the studio by the noted professor of sociology, Professor Dennis Ityavyar, who was the immediate past commissioner of education in Benue State. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much.
I think someone pointed out that the most crucial thing in Nigeria today, the only hope, in fact, for the future of this country, is for the election of good, honest, dedicated, incorruptible leaders. But how can we do that when the Electoral Commission itself has been said to have been compromised by the very leadership that is supposed to ensure its integrity?
Thank you very much. That's precisely the challenge, the major challenge of our country and our democracy. Because now you cannot even talk of any system that will deliver anything that will be acceptable to people. Because when you don't have the rule or law in a place where everything goes, and when you see someone who has not really won any election being sworn in, and when you have people who are voted, and then the next day you see the ballot papers in some corner at the back somewhere, and yet we declare people winners. So the challenge is enormous. And before we can talk of the system that people will be happy with, we must go back to the rule of law. In any place where there is democracy, the rule of law is very important. Right from the point of selection of candidates in this country, you see things that are never done in any other democracy. Paying voters to vote someone is a very easy and very well-known thing in Nigeria. But that is wrong. When you give someone money to vote for you, it is corruption, and you are liable to be judged. But here, when people go on convention to select leaders, the highest bidder is the one who takes the day. I heard in the last
dispensation, and that is done fairly openly.
It's done openly. And how can we have a system when that is done openly, and we say we are going to be where people want to be? Last time, in the last dispensation where people are now in governance, the selection of candidates, we heard of people who were paying $20,000 per candidate. And at the state level, candidates could pay $200,000 per delegate. And this was very well known, was known by the agencies that should say, don't do this. They know about it. And so what kind of system is this? Are we making the rule of law mockery? Because tell me other countries in the world where people will pay every delegate to vote for them. So when you ask about a system that is acceptable and a system that will bring justice to our country, we must first of all look at the issue of the rule of law.
And we must, in that process, and you make some very good points there, in that process, look at the Electoral Commission. Because if the Electoral Commission is above board, then it makes it very difficult for the, I mean, obviously people can still try and pay voters and all the rest of it, but it makes it impossible for the Electoral Commission itself to be compromised. And that brings me to the issue of a transparent electoral process on the assumption that the Electoral Commission is not compromised. And option A4 comes to mind, which was used in 1993 to deliver the freest and fairest election in this country's history, which perversely was annulled by the military government of the day. Just remind us of what option A4 was and why it worked so well.
Well, option A4, as used in 1993, was an open process of selecting candidates, and people would have to line up behind the candidates of their choice. And it was done openly, and so there were no controversies. And the Nigerians always will remember June 12 because they say that that was the freest election that was ever heard in Nigeria. And option A4 started from the local governments, and the local governments would, through open system, choose the candidate that was the best, and then they come to the state level, and then after the state level, at the national level. And in all this, it was open.
Right.
You see, that's the candidate you want. There will be his picture or her picture, and those people who supported the candidates will just line behind.
So basically, a method of voting where voters would queue behind the posters of their preferred candidate.
Exactly.
And were openly counted and the results openly and publicly recorded. There were no ballot boxes, no ballot papers, and no polling booths.
Exactly.
So nothing for anybody to snatch. Basically.
Exactly.
Would that sort of thing work today?
No, it will not work because since 1993 and now things have gotten worse. Even in the open counting, we see where people will start counting 1, 2, 10, 20, 50, 100, 1,000, and so on. And when you sit there and you say, no, that's not how to count, they say, if you do not like this, go to court. And then when you don't have the capacity
funny, but it
to
is
go to
funny.
court, so when people talk about option A4, it was fantastic, it was credible, and people liked it. And the fact that even today people talk about option A4 is to tell you that Nigerians want credible elections.
Yeah.
But it is very difficult to get credible election if INEC is not strong, if the judiciary is not strong, and if the rule of law is not there.
That's a good point.
The issue of money is too much in our election. If you are contesting for an election, people will know that either you have a godfather who is a money bag, or you yourself have a lot of money. Because you can never get candidacy if you are poor. Because it's bought. It's usually purchased. It's not something that, oh, this is a very good candidate.
And it's sold to the highest bidder. Basically.
Exactly.
Right.
You have a good candidate, very educated, very experienced, and so on. He won't get.
Yeah, because he doesn't have any money.
Because he doesn't have the money.
Right. But the reason why, because I mean, there's so many things that could have got in the way of option A4, which is why it's a fairly risky system. I mean, if it rained, for example, you'd basically be rained out and there would be no election because everybody would have to run away. The other thing, of course, is that if you use thugs to disrupt the queues, then that's pretty much the end of the election. But that didn't happen then. Was that because of military rule and the army who were policing the elections? Because you wouldn't trifle with the army at the time. They were completely 100% in charge. Whereas it could be a problem today.
Well, what you have said could be a disadvantage, but let me say that there is another more serious disadvantage of the option A4, and that is intimidation.
Right.
When you stand on the line of the person and the other person say, what? So this person is not standing on the line of my opponent.
Yes.
And then
go burn his house down.
Yeah, when he wins, it will be terrible for you. You say that these are the kind of people who didn't vote for me.
Yes.
And so he can burn your house, he can do all other things, he can even send thugs after you.
There could be consequences.
No, in terms of issues of rain and such things, you know that Nigerians, when they are very determined to do what is good and acceptable, they will do it.
Right.
Even when it is rainy, the people want credible
so they'll stand in the rain.
Yeah, they will stand in the rain.
Let me ask you this, because we're almost out of time. The 2015 election was the first time, it was the first time that an incumbent president was removed.
Yes.
And that was also judged to be reasonably free and fair. But not quite as free and fair as 1993. What are the differences between the two?
Between the 2015?
Yeah, and 1993. Because one was judged to be free and fair, another was judged to be marginally free and fair.
You know that when you suffer so long and you are starving, if you get a meal which is not the best, you will still be happy. Or if you are very thirsty for a long time, and you get water, even if it's not clean water, you are happy to drink such water. That is the reason why the 2015 election was judged as being credible. There were several other challenges that marred that election.
Right.
But people were very determined that let us have a resemblance of good democracy. And so we just brushed that aside. But it was not the perfect election we are looking for.
So we continue our search.
Yes.
Professor Dennis Ityavyar, I want to thank you very much indeed. It's been an education. I understand that why you were the Commissioner of Education. He's a noted professor of sociology and, as I mentioned, the immediate past Commissioner of Education in Benue State. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.